Lower the lights. Put on your headphones. This story begins now. Some stories don't begin with answers. They begin with a misunderstanding that lasts a lifetime. Tonight's story is about a moment that took only seconds, and a truth that took 25 years to arrive. It's about a father whose final act looked like abandonment, and a daughter who grew up believing she had been thrown away. This is not a story about the sea, but it's a story about love, the kind that doesn't explain itself, the kind that lets go in the dark so someone else can move toward the light. Put on your headphones, slow down your breathing, and listen carefully. Some memories don't arrive as pictures, they arrive as sensations. The smell of metal and salt, the sound of something enormous breathing in the dark, the feeling that the world is tilting and no one knows how to stop it. For most of her life, Maria Russo avoided the ocean. Not out of fear. Fear would have been simpler, but out of something harder to name. A quiet resistance. As if the sea and she had once shared a secret, and neither of them had kept it. She was 5 years old the last time she saw her father. Or rather, she was 5 years old the last time she remembered him clearly. The rest came later, rearranged by time, softened in some places and sharpened in others, until the memory no longer felt like something she owned. It felt borrowed. Her father's name was Antonio Russo. He was 28 years old when he stepped onto the San Giorgio, an immigrant ship bound from Europe to New York in the autumn of 1917. He was a carpenter by trade, a widower by circumstance, and a man who had learned early that hope often arrives disguised as risk. He had never seen America. He only knew its outline, the way people spoke about it in low voices, as if saying the name too loudly might cause it to disappear. A place where work existed, where hunger didn't follow you from room to room, where a child might grow up without learning the shape of loss too soon. Maria's mother had died bringing her into the world. Antonio never spoke of it directly, but the absence lived with them like a third presence. In the quiet moments, in the way he watched his daughter sleep, in how tightly he held her hand when they walked through crowded streets. When he decided to leave, there was no grand farewell, no speeches, only a single suitcase, a folded document with unfamiliar stamps, and a promise he made to himself more than to anyone else. She would not grow up here, he told himself. She would not inherit this sorrow. The San Giorgio was crowded in the way ships often were back then. Layers of people stacked into compartments based on what they could afford to hope for. Third-class passengers slept low in the hull, where the air was damp and the walls sweated at night. Families shared bunks. Strangers shared stories. Everyone shared the same unspoken belief that the worst was behind them. The Atlantic had other plans. The storm began without ceremony. No dramatic announcement. No warning bell. Just a subtle shift in the air, a tightening, like the world drawing breath. By nightfall, the waves were no longer rolling. They were striking, slamming themselves against the ship with a force that felt personal. Maria woke to noise, to voices shouting in languages she didn't understand, to the floor tilting beneath her small body as if the rules of standing had suddenly changed. Antonio scooped her up before she could cry. He pressed her face into his coat, the familiar smell of wood dust and soap grounding her as the ship lurched again. "It's nothing," he told her, though he did not believe it. "It's only the sea talking." Water found its way below deck quickly. It always does. It slipped through seams and doors, and places no one ever checks until it's too late. Within minutes, the floor was slick. Within moments after that, it was cold. People surged toward the stairwells, panic moving faster than reason. The ship groaned, a deep wounded sound that seemed to come from its bones. Lights flickered. Someone screamed a name and never finished saying it. Antonio held Maria above the rising water, his arms already shaking from the effort. Each step forward felt like pushing against the weight of the ocean itself. He could feel her heart racing through her thin dress. He could feel his own breath shortening, not from fear, but from understanding. They were too low, they were too late. The ship tilted sharply to one side. People fell. Luggage slid. The water surged, claiming space that had belonged to air only seconds before. Antonio pressed Maria against his chest and turned, searching, not for an exit, but for an answer. That was when he saw it. A porthole, shattered by the force of the waves. Glass clung to the metal rim like teeth. Outside, beyond the chaos and rain, beams of white light cut through the darkness. Distant, unsteady, rescue ships. It was not a plan. It was not even a thought. It was instinct, sharpened by love and time running out. Antonio lifted Maria toward the opening. She began to cry then, her small hands grabbing at his collar, her voice breaking through the noise around them. "Papa." He did not hesitate. He kissed her hair once, just once, as if sealing something, as if telling her everything he would never have time to explain. Then he pushed her through the broken porthole. The ocean swallowed her scream. For a moment, only a moment, Antonio watched the dark water close around the place where she had been. He pressed his hands against the glass-lined rim, ignoring the blood, and shouted into the storm. "Swim, Maria. Swim to the light. They're coming." The ship lurched again. A sound like tearing metal filled the air. Someone pulled at his arm, screaming something he could not hear. Antonio did not turn around. He had already made his choice. 7 minutes later, the San Giorgio disappeared beneath the surface of the Atlantic. 117 third-class passengers went with it. Antonio Russo was among them. His body was never found. Maria was pulled from the water 45 minutes later. Barely conscious, blue with cold, alive. She was wrapped in a blanket that smelled of oil and smoke, carried onto a rescue vessel she would never remember by name. She asked for her father once. No one answered. In the days that followed, language became a wall. She did not speak English. The nurses did not speak Italian. Names were written down incorrectly. Details were lost. The story of that night was told without her in it, reduced to numbers and records and lists of the dead. She was placed in an orphanage in New York City, a stone building that echoed when doors closed. She learned new words, new rules, new silences, and slowly, a belief settled inside her. A belief that made sense to a child who had been pushed into darkness by the person she trusted most. He didn't want me, that's why he let go. She carried that thought with her for 25 years, like a weight, like a question that no one knew how to answer. And the sea said nothing at all. There are children who grow up with stories. Stories about where they came from, about who loved them first, about how they arrived in the world already wanted. Maria did not have stories, she had fragments. A man's hands, rough but careful, a voice that smelled like tobacco and salt. The memory of being lifted, not gently but decisively, towards something bright and terrible. At the orphanage, adults avoided her questions. Some because they did not understand them, others because they thought silence was kinder than truth. When Maria asked about her father, she was told only that he was gone. Gone was a word that meant everything and nothing. As the years passed, the fragments hardened into something sharper. The memory of the ocean became less about waves and more about falling. Less about rescue lights and more about the moment her father's hands disappeared. Children are excellent at filling in blanks. They are terrible at being fair. By the time Maria was 10, she had decided what happened that night. Not because anyone told her, but because she needed the story to end somewhere. He chose himself. That was the only explanation that fit the shape of the wound. In school, other children talked about their parents the way people talk about weather, casually, with expectation. Maria listened more than she spoke. She learned early that some truths, even imagined ones, are easier to carry alone. She was adopted briefly, returned quietly, then placed again. Each home taught her something different about attachment. How easily it could be promised. How quickly it could be withdrawn. Love, she learned, was something people sometimes dropped when it became inconvenient. By her 20s, Maria had made herself practical, self-contained. She worked in a garment factory, stitching dresses for women she would never meet. The rhythm of the machines suited her. Predictable, unemotional. She avoided questions about family. When asked, she said she had none. It was simpler than explaining a father who existed only as a memory of abandonment. At night, though, the ocean returned. Not in dreams, but in stillness. In the sound of rain against windows. In the feeling of standing near something vast and unreadable. She never spoke of it. She didn't need to. The sea was patient. It waited. The letter arrived on an ordinary afternoon. Maria was 30 years old. She had just returned from work, her hands sore, her mind already drifting towards sleep. The envelope was thin, official, addressed carefully, as if the sender was afraid of making a mistake. Inside was a request. A researcher, compiling records from a shipwreck decades earlier, had found a name. Antonio Russo, third-class passenger, deceased. He was looking for surviving relatives. Maria read the name once, then again. She did not recognize it as her father's. Not at first. It took several minutes for the connection to form, for the memory to shift slightly, like a picture being brought into focus. Antonio. The sound of it settled somewhere deep, unfamiliar, and known at the same time. She sat down before her legs could decide otherwise. The researcher's letter was careful, neutral. It described the storm, the sinking, the number of lives lost. It mentioned, almost in passing, that a child had survived after being forced through a broken porthole. A witness account. Maria felt something loosen in her chest, then tighten again. The words on the page did not accuse. They did not explain. They simply existed. For the first time, her memory had company. She spent the next weeks in a quiet unraveling, visiting libraries, requesting records, reading about the San Giorgio as if it were a place she might return to, not a grave she had escaped. Every new detail pressed against her old certainty. Why would he push me? Why would he let go? The answer did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces, in testimonies, in survivor accounts that spoke of darkness and impossible choices, of parents who had been forced to decide in seconds what would echo for lifetimes. Maria walked to the river one evening and stood watching the water move. Not violently, just endlessly. She tried to imagine the night as it really was, not as she had carried it. A man holding a child, a ship leaning past the point of mercy, a window, a light. She realized then how small she had been, how little space her body would have taken, how impossible it would have been for him to follow. For the first time in 25 years, Maria allowed a different thought to enter. What if letting go was the only way he could keep me? The question hurt more than the old belief. It demanded grief instead of anger, love instead of distance. The sea, it turned out, had never been silent. Some truths do not arrive with relief. They arrive with weight. Maria did not cry when she finally accepted what her father had done. There was no sudden release, no dramatic collapse into grief. Instead, there was a long stillness, like standing in a room after something fragile has broken, unsure where the sharp edges have landed. For days, she carried the new understanding the way one carries an object too precious to set down and too heavy to hold comfortably. It followed her to work. It sat beside her at meals. It waited for her in the quiet moments before sleep. Her father had not abandoned her. He had chosen her. And somehow that hurt more, because it meant that for 25 years she had lived inside the wrong story. Not a lie told by others, but a conclusion she had drawn to survive. A version of the past that allowed her to keep moving forward, even if it kept her distant from joy. She wondered how many decisions in her life had been shaped by that misunderstanding. The way she kept people at arm's length, the ease with which she expected to be left, the quiet pride she took in needing no one. None of it felt foolish. It felt human. One evening, Maria returned to the river. It was early autumn, the water dark and slow, reflecting a sky that had already begun to dim. She stood there longer this time, letting the air cool her face. She spoke aloud softly, not because she believed anyone would answer, but because silence no longer felt like enough. "I didn't know," she said. The words dissolved into the sound of moving water. She imagined her father as he must have been in that final moment, not as a figure in a memory, but as a man, young, afraid, certain of only one thing. She wondered if he had felt regret in those seconds, or peace, or nothing at all except urgency. She wondered if he had known she would live long enough to misunderstand him. There was no way to know. But for the first time, the not knowing did not feel like a wound. It felt like a space she could step back from. In the months that followed, Maria changed quietly. Not dramatically. Not in ways others might notice. She did not announce her discovery. She did not rewrite her past out loud. But inside, something rearranged itself. She allowed herself to stay longer in conversations, to listen without bracing for disappointment, to accept kindness without suspicion. Love, she realized, was not always gentle. Sometimes it was brutal. Sometimes it looked like loss. Sometimes it arrived too early, or too late, or in a form that could not be explained to a child. She visited a church one afternoon, not out of faith but out of curiosity. She lit a candle and watched the flame steady itself. She thought of the light her father had pointed toward in the storm. Swim to the light. For years, she had believed those words meant survival alone. Now she understood something else. They meant continuation. A few weeks later, Maria received another letter from the researcher. This one contained copies of the official records. Her father's name typed neatly. His age. His occupation. A single line beneath it. Presumed deceased during rescue attempt. She traced the letters slowly, as if memorizing them. Antonio Russo existed. Not just as a ghost in her memory. Not just as a mistake she had carried. But as a man who had lived, chosen, and been lost. She folded the paper carefully and placed it in a drawer. Not to hide it, but to keep it safe. Some truths did not need to be displayed to be honored. Years later, Maria would stand near the ocean again. Not because she had conquered it. Not because the past had lost its power. But because she no longer felt pushed toward it. The water was calm that day. Almost polite. She watched the horizon blur into the sky and thought about distance. How something so far away could still reach you. She thought about love. How easily it is misunderstood when seen only from one side. How often its deepest acts leave no witnesses. How many people carry the echo of sacrifices they never fully recognize. Maria removed her shoes and stepped closer to the shore. The water touched her ankles, cold but steady. She did not flinch. "I made it," she whispered, not as a boast, as a report. She did not know if her father would have wanted her to be happy. The word felt too simple, but she believed he would have wanted her to live fully, to trust the light when it appeared, to keep moving even when the water pulled. As she turned away from the sea, Maria felt something settle, not closure, but understanding. The kind that does not erase pain, but gives it context. Love's greatest act is not holding on. Sometimes it is letting go, pushing someone toward a future you will never see, trusting that the light will find them even if you cannot. The ocean kept its dead, but it did not keep his meaning. And for the first time, Maria walked forward without the weight of misunderstanding pulling at her heels, carrying instead a quieter truth, that she had been loved enough to be saved. She had just been listening for the wrong answer. Somewhere tonight, someone is carrying the wrong story about themselves, about why they were left, about why something ended the way it did. Not every goodbye is abandonment. Not every silence means absence of love. Sometimes the truth arrives late, not to undo the past, but to soften the way we carry it. If this story stayed with you, let it stay gently. And if you're holding a memory that still hurts, perhaps ask yourself, what if love was present, even when it looked like it wasn't? Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, and share. Rest well.